Welcome to your 2022 excavation recap. This is a look at what we've achieved this year and what we have uncovered about the site of Vindolanda through our wonderful excavation season. In 2021, we primarily investigated the 3rd and 4th century layers of occupation of the site. We uncovered a set of cavalry barracks and an associated building, and we also uncovered a lovely 3rd century scola, which is an officer's mess or a place where the officers would get their meal made. This year, we are looking at the underlying levels of Vindolanda, primarily focusing on the Antonine and Severn period. These range between 160 and 200 AD, and under them we hit the beautiful, fragrant smelling anaerobic. So the Severn campaign in the north of Britain lasted between 208 and 211, when Emperor Septimius Severus died at Eboracum, York, of pneumonia. This was a very complicated time to be alive in Roman Britain, and this complication and this complexity is reflected in the Vindolanda material and in the type of settlement that we observe here at the site. Erected at some point in around 208 AD, we have these roundhouses. The Roundhouse Settlement is really interesting because it's unique. There is no evidence of roundhouses arranged this way anywhere else on Hadrian's Wall, or for that matter, anywhere else in the empire. Our traditional roundhouses, if one can call them traditional, are made of sandstone. You can observe a little bit right here, and have compacted sandstone floors, sometimes pebble dash, sometimes not. They follow a pattern. They come in groups of 10 and blocks of 5, often back to back, with one side facing south and one side facing north. This pattern is repeated several times, and it was positioned outside the Severn Fortlet. The Severn Fortlet is behind my back, is where now the extramural settlement lays, and was surrounded by an incredible defensive complex with ditches up to 4 meters wide and up to 3 meters deep. There is lots of research going on regarding the Severn period at Vindolanda already. Some of this research utilizes new and groundbreaking methodologies. One example of this is organic residue analysis. We are looking at the lipid content of vessels from the Severn period. The lipid content is the fatty chains that create and sort of embed themselves in the edges and the rims of the pots when you're cooking. So we're looking at, for example, what was being cooked in the roundhouses and comparing it with what the people that lived in the fortlet ate, and try and locate really the geographic origin of these two sets of people, whether they ate the same things or different things, and whether their diet included elements of their original culture. Now, an interesting thing that we've uncovered this year is that we don't only have these very, very carefully laid out roundhouses, but we have a new and different type. Underneath the foundations of a 4th century cavalry barrack, we uncovered something that we had not seen before: the remains of a solitary and very different roundhouse. This roundhouse here has an access path that is stone lined, and its walls, differently from its contemporaries, are not made out of recycled sandstones from the Antonine period, but rather have a circular gully over here. Now, we've had researchers from the University of Edinburgh, in particular Tanya Romankiewicz, looking at taking samples within this gully to locate any evidence of organic material being used in constructing the elevation of this new type of roundhouse. The roundhouse right behind me has got several phases of occupation and is potentially being cut out by another building. But what really makes it special, on top of its unusual architecture is it stands in isolation. We're about 6 meters away from its nearest contemporary, and we have lots of extra features. We've got the path that we've just walked on, and there's another path on that side. But most importantly, it's got external equipment. So it's got a really interesting rubbish pit right here. And that's where all of the most interesting finds from these roundhouse were uncovered. We have a beautiful copper alloy hinge in the shape of a duck. This is not the first duck that we encounter in the Severn period. Earlier, we excavated a rather lovely duck brooch made of solid silver. But the comparison between the two ducks is really, really strong. We have two different worlds here facing each other. The solid silver duck from the Severn ditch, which would have probably been discarded by an inhabitant of the fort. And this copper alloy duck, a completely different iconography, much simpler, much more streamlined, and in a much more common material. It's really unusual for us to have material culture directly from the roundhouses, so we've been extremely lucky this year in locating this rubbish pit and also in uncovering more and more sherds of pottery from the traditional roundhouses that we can use in organic residue analysis. One of the star finds from this excavation season was the second Dinos carving. And this was found right here in the rubble fill of this rectilinear cut. Now, how can we date the second Dinos stone if it hasn't got a date written on it? We date it stratigraphically. We look at the cut and we look at what the cut removed in its wake. And what it removed was the foundation of a 3rd century building, as well as the foundation of an earlier Antonine building. What it did not remove was the foundations of the overlying 4th century cavalry barrack. So this places the cut at some point in the late 3rd century, as it cuts off a bit of the 3rd century building, or in the early 4th, as it comes before the construction of the barrack. It is possible, therefore, that that would be the dating for our second Dinos carving. But what is it exactly? It's a lovely piece of sandstone onto which there was a phallus. The phallus was really carefully carved, really deep set carving. So we think that actually the phallus was already there when somebody thought that they would add a little bit of inscription of their own. And the inscription reads, Second Dinos Cacor. The inscription is currently being analysed by our epigraphy experts. We've got a great team and they are working on publishing this material. However, you can tell that second Dinos wasn't a well-liked guy. Cacor is not exactly a great word. It's probably badly spelled cacator, but ultimately it's telling you that second Dinos wasn't popular at that period in time. So that was a great find from this excavation area. Some of our most unique archaeology lies beneath these waters. It's not usually like this. In fact, it looked quite different during the summer. But really, the water is doing us a favour. Trapped in the anaerobic material, there are all sorts of precious organic artifacts, ranging from the obvious, the Vindolanda tablets, going forwards into a lovely wooden shovel that we uncovered earlier this year, and some incredible things like a small knife still stuck in its sheath. All of these objects would be permanently damaged if they were to be exposed to drought and heat. So the water is actually doing us a favour. It's preserving those environments which are going to wait for us next year when we break ground again. We uncovered some incredible buildings, and these are preserved in anaerobic conditions, which means that the lack of oxygen slows down the bacteria that normally accelerates the decay of organic materials. So wood that you can see poking out of the water is preserved, and so is leather and any other organic materials. Starting from the most recent find, the one that's closest to us in the timeline, we have evidence of timber buildings erected in the early Antonine period. Going below there, we've got cavalry barracks dating all the way to period 4. And below that, again, we are getting closer to the natural, which is the subsoil that the Romans encountered when they first arrived here. We've got some really interesting period 3 buildings. We do think that they are examples of cavalry barracks, and we say so based on the presence of urine pits. These urine pits are elongated holes in the ground dug straight into the natural boulder clay, which were likely filled by horse excrement, which was then recycled in various uses, but particularly in the tanning process. From this area, you can glimpse at beautiful wattle and daub fencing that runs right across here. Interestingly, inside these fences, we had lots of material culture. We had shoes, we had an inkwell, and we had some lovely examples of red deer antler, which had been used to reinforce the outside walls of the barrack. The Antonine period is a really complicated period of the occupation at Vindolanda. It extends roughly from 160 AD to 200 AD. But there is evidence of prior sort of messing around with this area. What we've got here is the remains of an infantry barrack stretching north-south. They're in really poor condition. The sandstone is really crumbly here. And these are really interesting as they face a rather large expanse of pebble-dash courtyard. So it looks like there was quite a lot of empty space in this part of the fort during the Antonine period. But empty space doesn't mean useless space. What looks like we have here is almost a parade ground, or perhaps a large courtyard with a colonnade running along it. And the evidence for this is being found over there. We look at 2 incredible sandstone carved plinths. These plinths here are not new to Vindolanda. In previous excavation, we did find very similar ones. They were the colonnade of a tomb or a temple that was excavated a while ago. And they look like they've been made by the same hand. Now, not only we've got 2 of these beautiful carved stones, but we had some really interesting material culture from this area. In particular, just over here, we had a rather lovely vessel in the shape of an owl. So we've looked at what we've uncovered this year regarding the Severn period and the Antonine period and the early timber Antonine forts and all of that beautiful anaerobic going from period 4 all the way down to period 1, 2 and 3 and the natural below. What's the plan for next year, I hear you ask? We are going to excavate the area I'm standing on. We have left a few surprises for ourselves. For example, this beautiful quernstone, which is part of a lovely courtyard surface. We're going to investigate this area in detail to try and figure out if there is any remains of Antonine buildings underneath my feet, to then delve deeper into the anaerobic and investigate the timber phases of the Antonine period, and again go down into all those beautiful period 4, 3, 2 and 1 buildings. We're really looking forward to starting again. This is the last year of our scheduled monument consent at Vindolanda, and really we look forward to bringing this excavation to conclusion and learning as much as possible about this quadrant of the fort.
We've had some really exciting finds from the excavations this year, and I pulled out a couple here that really, I think, show that kind of breadth of finds that we get. But we've also had a couple of press releases that you're able to go onto the website and find out about, including our naughty stone just here, and another object, the cornu mouthpiece for a cornu instrument within the Roman army. But onto some things that will go into the recent finds case next year. My favorite to start out with was this little guy. So we have another duck brooch, of course, from the Vindolanda site, but this year we found a completely different type of duck brooch. It's kind of a little 3D duck. You can see the head here, but it's also got some lovely enameling in blue and probably another color that's just degraded along here to show that it would have been a brightly colored object. The next object is absolutely beautiful. It's a little Cupid statuette. Unfortunately, it doesn't stand up very well anymore, but you can see the figure. We have too much corrosion on the face, but actually on the back, you can see the lovely wings and even his little cute Cupid-like bum. Both of those objects had gone out on social media over the course of the year. But this next object that I'm going to show you has not been out on social media and is a first for Vindolanda. We have this lovely knife that's in very good condition, just here. It's made of iron and would have had a bone handle. But the interesting bit about it is we've also got its little leather sheath that it was found with. And they do fit just perfectly together, and you can see the stitch holes in the leather to sew it up. Well, now the fun bit begins for us here. We actually go into the winter period, which is our period for research. And objects like these and the other hundreds of objects that have been found this year will go through not only the conservation and cataloging process, but also start their research, and we'll see what else we can find.